This is the next video in the Historic Ordnance series. What you are looking at is a couple photos, top and bottom, of a former East German PM-60 low metallic anti-tank mine. Now, this mine, according to NATO intel that I could come across, entered service in 1958 with the East German Army, the National Volksarmee. And it was one of their primary anti-tank mines. Now, when East and West Germany reunited in the early 1990s, it looks like the Bundeswehr said that these mines were not needed and they were designated for sale to friendly countries. Reportedly, Germany sent out all existing stocks of PM-60s to Egypt, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. However, the reason I am covering this mine is I swear I've seen pictures of this being found by Russian sappers in Ukraine. It's either this mine or one that's really close to it in appearance. That's why I'm covering it. I have not been able to find those pictures, those videos of those mines. It wasn't featured in the photo. It was kind of one of them that was in the background or off to the side of some of the mines that had been located by a demining team. This mine is referred to in older sources as a K1 anti-tank mine or anti-vehicular mine. Some of the technicals on this. The casing is completely made out of plastic. There is very little metal in this mine. The only metal would be in the fuse, depending on which fuse is used. There are two different styles of fuse that can be used with this mine. Now, the mine is 12 3/4 inches in diameter, 4 2/3 inches in height. Weight 25 pounds, of which explosive filler is 16.5 pounds and the filler is TNT. There is 2 tetral boosters inside this mine. Now, this is a view of the top of the mine with a section of the pressure plate has been removed for the picture to show some of the internals. This is the bottom. The boosters are located on the bottom. Here is the main booster directly underneath the pressure plate in dead center. That's the main booster. And there's a smaller one right here under this plug. This is the secondary fuse well for attaching an anti-handling device. There's a small booster there also. Now, pressure to set this mine off is pretty high. Pressure on the lowest end is 440 pounds. On the high end, it can take up to 1,100 pounds to crush the pressure plate on top to activate that fuse in the center there. Now, there are 2 types of fuses for this mine. And I had the pictures of them, or at least drawings from NATO sources right here. This is the mechanical fuse for that mine. It has a red collar, which is right here. And then on the top of the fuse, it's marked number 2. This is the chemical fuse for this mine. It has a yellow collar right here. And on top of the fuse, it's marked number 3. The actual designations, this is either a CZ60 or a ZZ60. This one is an MZ60. Both fuses operate pretty much the same. The difference is this one has a little bit of metal inside. It has a spring and a striker to set off the detonator down here at the bottom, to set off the blasting cap, to set off the booster charge, to set off the main charge. With the chemical fuse, everything is plastic except right in here, there's a glass ampule of acid. When the pressure plunger here gets pushed down, it crushes the ampule. That acid mixes with chemical compounds around it, causing a flame, which then sets off the blasting cap, our detonator, to set off the booster and set off the mine. Chemical fuses were a thing back in the 1940s and back in the 1950s when this mine was designed. They kind of left the options for being used in landmines back in the 1960s because it was found that acid-based fuses or chemical fuses like this were not very reliable. And it was primarily because of the glass that would contain the acid. The acid doesn't break down glass right away, but it does work on it. It does eat it away slowly. And you have the issue of, depending on how it's stored, if the temperature conditions are not right, you can cause a little bit of weakening in the glass at the right temperatures. And then if something happens, like the crate is mishandled and that type of stuff, it's dropped, you run the risk that that glass ampule will then break without the plunger even being pressed, setting off that fuse. So they were, kind of removed from service in pretty much 99% of the world in the 1960s. But there's a few outliers that keep appearing, like this one with the East German mine. They probably still produce them up into the 60s because that's what they had available. I've also come across some with Chinese mines from the 1950s, 1960s, also using chemical fuses to set off the mines. Now this mine, it's listed as a copy of an Italian mine from World War II. But when you look at the internals and that stuff, they are not the same. This really is kind of a mistaken identity. It looks similar to a mine made by the Italians in World War II, but it's not the same. It's just a general appearance thing. The Italian mine from World War II, I couldn't find the designation for it. I did find it listed in demining sources from North Africa, and they just refer to it as an Italian anti-tank mine. And the general appearance on the outside, it may look similar, but the Italian one was made out of metal, the East German made out of plastic. Now I have conflicting information for how this mine is installed. It's armed, and later for its removal, it's disarming. And I think the reason for that is they must have done a change in the production run sometime during its life. Now this particular one here, that was captured sometime in the 1960s. Either an East German soldier brought it over with them, turned it over when they defected, or an East German civilian dug it up, turned it over to NATO troops, or some NATO spy agency went in there on the inter-German border, the border between West Germany and East Germany, dug one up and hauled it out for technical intel. This picture is 1960s. If you look at the construction on this, one thing that you'll notice, right here, around the top here on the pressure plate, it looks like it's fused, like it's been melted together. And I've seen another picture from this series where it shows what looks like a rubberized cap here in the center. Now here is a picture from current NATO sources from within the last 20 years. And inside the NATO manuals, it shows that the top pressure plate is not fused around the edge like the one seen in the 1960s, and there is no separate cap here in the center. And when you get really close on some of the pictures, it looks like this center piece here is held in with plastic screws. So I think what happened, and we've seen this with other mines from former comm block countries, is during its lifetime, its service time, especially early on, they had a change to simplify production. And both mines were still designated the same and still issued the same. This is probably the main production run from over its lifetime. And this one is probably one of the early productions. So I have two different ways to arm this mine based on which run it is. So I'm going to go through first on this one, the one that looks like it had a separate piece here in the center that could be removed. So with this model, first you're going to go through, inspect the mine and inspect the fuse for damage. The damage must be severe enough to make it inoperable for it to be considered, unserviceable. If the damage is not that bad, the mine can be used. At that point, it's going to determine, are you going to lay this out with a mechanical mine layer or hand emplacement? If it's going to be with the mechanical mine layer, you're going to unscrew the cap from the bottom here, the booster closure plug. You're going to remove the plug and you are going to install the booster charge here. Once the booster charge is installed, you screw back in the booster closure cap. You will then flip the mine over. Make sure that the arming fork, which is right here, is pulled out into the armed position. You are then going to remove the pressure plate plug here from the top. You're going to screw in either a number 2 or a number 3 fuse. You are going to remove the transport safety fork from the fuse. You are then going to push the arming fork forward to lock that fuse in a safe position, and then you're going to reinstall the pressure plate plug over the top. The mine is then ready to be taken out to the site and emplaced. Now, with this version, what I could find on that one, go through, inspect the mine. Same thing, make sure that the mine is serviceable. If it's going to be employed by a mine layer or you're going to prep it before you get to the site, you will flip the mine over. You will unscrew the booster closure plug, which has the booster attached to it, reportedly. You are going to screw in the fuse, either a number 2 or a number 3, into the booster here. You're going to remove the transport safety fork from around the neck of the fuse here. You are then going to make sure the arming fork is for sure in the armed position. You are going to screw in the booster closure plug and then push the arming fork in to lock itself around the fuse to safe it for transport. Now, at the site where the mine is going to be put in, both models, you're going to prep the area. If you're going to dig it into the ground with hand in place, you're going to dig the hole so that the top of the pressure plate here is level with the ground. The maximum of soil over the top of the mine for camouflage is 2 centimeters. If it is loose covering such as brush and grass, it can be a max of 6 centimeters reportedly. You got your hole dug. You then go through, put the mine inside the hole. You pull the arming fork out to the armed position, camouflage the mine. Now, if this is going out with a mechanical mine layer, when it's that mine's turn to go down the chute to get in place, you take the mine from its storage location, pull out on the safety fork, put it on the chute, it then goes down. It either gets buried into the ground by the plow behind it, or it gets surface laid behind it. And it is armed as soon as you pull out that arming fork. There is no countdown on this. There is no mechanicals on the fusing. Now for removal of the mines. First we'll do it with what I think is the initial model here with the separate pressure plate plug. First thing you do, you check the area for signs of protective mines and booby traps. You then locate the mine itself. You then uncover the mine. At that point, you locate the arming fork and you push it in. You will then remove the pressure plate plug from on top and get a look at the inside. Make sure that it is safed. You will then check the mine for anti-handling devices. If there are any anti-handling devices attached to the mine, destroy it in place. Do not continue with the disarming procedures. If there are no anti-handling devices, you remove the mine from the hole in the ground or remove it from the vegetation where it's been placed in. You will then pull out on the arming fork. You will reinstall the transport safety fork or clip around the fuse in here to safe it. You will then unscrew the fuse from the booster. At that point, you're going to push the arming fork back in. You're going to put the pressure plate plug back into place. Flip the mine to its side, open it up, and remove the booster. You will then turn in all 3 pieces to the mine dump for later reuse. Now with this type, the initials are the same. Check for protective mines, check for booby traps, then locate the mine and uncover. At this point, you're going to safe the mine with the arming fork. You're going to check around the mine for anti-handling devices. If you find one, blow the mine in place. If you do not find an anti-handling device, you continue on. No anti-handling devices found. Remove the mine from the hole, preferably with the use of a grappling hook or a rope attached to the carry handle here. Pull it out of the hole. The arming fork should be located at roughly directly to your right or directly to your left. You will turn the mine to its side so that you can access the booster closure plug on the bottom. You will unscrew the booster plug. You will, almost got ahead of myself. You have it on its side. You will pull the arming fork out to arm the fuse or to remove it from its safe status. You will then unscrew and remove the booster closure plug from the bottom of the mine. As you are doing that, you are taking the fuse out with it. Now, the reason you have to rearm it, pull the arming fork out. If you try removing this while that fork is in place, you're putting a lot of pressure here on that fuse, and you're not going to be able to pull this out of there. This is going to be holding it inside the mine. So you have to arm it, then unscrew it, and that will allow you to remove the fuse from the mine. At that point, when you had the booster out with the fuse attached, you will reinstall the transport safety clip around the neck of the fuse, unscrew the fuse from the booster. You will then screw the booster, which is attached to the plug, back into the mine, and you will turn in the mine and the fuse to the mine dump for later reuse. Now, I got a couple pictures here on the cross section of the internals, and I've been looking at these really closely to try to figure out which of the steps that I came across is the correct instructions. And that's when I came to the conclusion that there had to be two separate models. This is a cross-section that was done in the 1970s by the U.S. Army. This was done by NATO in the early 2000s. And when you look at both of these, you can see that the pressure plate up here, it's just one big piece. I do not see signs that the pressure plate can be unscrewed easily from the top of the mine. So that's where I came across that discrepancy, where you had the pictures from the 1960s where it shows it's separate pieces. And this is what NATO says is or was inside the storage of the German military, the Bundeswehr. So I think they did two different variations. But as you can see here, booster here, booster here. There is a plug down here at the bottom which just unscrews, and it looks like if you can't do it by hand using these threads, they did include a slot here in the center that you could put a screwdriver or some piece like the side of a knife into here and start to unscrew it that way. You can see the arming fork here, which just slides in and out. And this acts as a collar around the fuse during transport. Over here we have the secondary fuse well, which normally has just a plug over it. When you arm it, you remove that plug, screw in the firing device into this fuse well. Now, according to NATO sources, the anti-handling devices that this was designed for going off a commonality of threads, it looks like this was designed to employ the Russian-made MUV series of anti-handling devices. So as long as it has a similar thread pattern to a MUV fuse, it can be screwed into the bottom of the mine here. And then on this one, as you can see in this picture, it can also be command detonated with just a blasting cap, either a non-electric attached to det cord or an electric which is connected to its leads back to a firing device. It's a pretty simple mine overall. I'm surprised the German government did not use these. I came across a memo that the German government sent to the organization that was created to control landmines after the Ottawa landmine treaty in the late 1990s. the German government was being questioned as to what happened to the stockpiles of East German mines. And the German government got kind of nasty with that organization, and they told them that none of the mines cited by the organization from the East German military were ever accepted into official inventory for the Bundeswehr. And they mentioned in that memorandum that they sold off their existing stockpiles of East German mines in the mid-1990s. With the PM-60s, it said, were sent to Egypt, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. So they're out there. They're not employed a lot. Like I said, I think I've seen pictures of these appearing in Ukraine, which is entirely possible. But I cannot find them actually featured in a photograph or featured in a video. They were kind of off on the side, you know, that little display that's set up of the mines that were removed from that particular minefield for showing to the media. And all the media wanted to see was the ones that were sent from the United States, the ones sent from France, the ones sent from England. They didn't care about something like this. But there you go. That's the information that I could come across on the German PM-60 low metallic anti-tank mine. Chances of coming across them, it's pretty low, but the chances are not zero. Now, for all my engineer brothers and the Patriot militia movements, always remember essayons.